Hello and welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Sales. I'm Kasey Jones.
And I'm Ashleigh Early.
And I am super excited for this conversation. We're going to be talking with Blake Hudson. He is the admissions manager at Victory Lap. He helps professionals find clarity in their identity and purpose so they can better sell themselves. And I can say of the conversation we've had right before hitting record and some of the answers, Blake, that you have given to our intake, I feel like this is going to be a really meaty and real episode. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. That's high praise. The expectations are set now. So
yeah, we're just gonna keep raising that bar. See how high we can get you.
This is going to be the podcast episode we've ever had.
Okay. See, now you flipped it back on us. See, I like that. There you go.
I would love to dive right into something that you said about that you think about and that kind of drives you and that you really talk to other sales professionals about, which is this concept of the gratitude gap. And tell us a little bit about kind of what this is and how you kind of came to this understanding.
Sure. Well, I have to give a little bit of context. You know, context informs content. So
Absolutely.
Right to the meat, I'll give you the why. I was in a sales role. This was actually my first sales role. And I hit the ground running. Shout out to Victory Lap. They trained me well, prepared me to succeed in that role. And first 3 months, I hit quota. You know, I was doing really well. And then I came back in month 4 and everything changed. My quota had doubled. The things that I needed to focus on had halved. I went from outbound and inbound to just inbound. And I felt very daunted. I felt like I wasn't going to be able to achieve these metrics that were given to me, especially on the heels of that success. And, you know, long story short, I spent the better part of a quarter basically sulking. A lot of my coworkers were very frustrated as well by these goals. And I remember, you know, I was having a conversation with someone and it dawned on me that I was looking at the situation all wrong. I realized that if I were able to look around and be grateful for things, that would change my perspective. So she had asked how things going, and I really literally just started to count blessings. I was like, well, I mean, I live in the city now, and I don't live with my parents anymore. I mean, I got my then girlfriend, now fiance. I got the tools I need to be successful, the flexibility to do this job the way I want. I'm building a craft in this industry. I mean, I guess things aren't all that bad. And what I realized as I continued to have that perspective and watch some of my peers have the opposite was that there was a lot of entitlement. And as my entitlement, or as one's entitlement exceeds their gratitude, that gap between those two determines your frustration. And for me, what I started to realize that as my gratitude crept up above my entitlement, that gap determined my happiness and contentment. And so I just tried to make sure that I was always looking for things to be grateful for, because with entitlement, you lose twice. You are frustrated by what you've yet to receive, and you can't fully appreciate what you have. With gratitude, everything you have is great, and anything else you get is gravy. It's just extra on top of that. And so I tried to have that mentality, and I saw it get me through a very difficult spot.
I think we're both sitting here a little bit silent because I've never heard it put that way before. And that's probably the best way I've heard described kind of A, why entitlement can get so toxic, but B, why it's so easy to fall into that, especially as salespeople, and especially if you're in a very metrics driven organization. It's I'm doing the numbers. Why am I not getting? It's a frustration. It's an entitlement, even though we don't like to call it that.
True.
That's huge.
I looked around. It also has perspective too. So this was my first role. This is all I ever knew. And I had other people who were like, I worked at Salesforce. We had this and we had that, and I deserve to be promoted. And I should have X, Y, and Z. And I mean, in some instance, they were right, but at the same time, too much of that mindset can be overwhelming, and it can just lead you down a mental place that is not conducive to your success. Whereas the opposite, I mean, it got to a point where I was grateful for people hanging up on me because they picked up the phone. You know, like you just got to find those opportunities to be grateful. And it kept me motivated.
You know, the other thing that I think is really powerful about it is it puts the agency back in your own hands. And I think one of the things that's really toxic about entitlement is that you're saying that it's someone else's responsibility to make your life better or to do the things that you want or need. And that's a very disempowering, is that a word?
Yeah.
Disempowering kind of mindset to be in. You know, someone said something to me the other day that is just like, it just will not stop rattling around in my brain. And she said, you know, when you take responsibility for your life, the choices you made, and even the mistakes you've made, you step into your own power because you recognize that you can actually change those things. And entitlement really removes all of that agency, even though it feels more, I think sometimes the people that have entitlement think that they're coming from a place of power, like I deserve this, I should just get this, but it's really you leaving it up to somebody else to deliver it to you.
Right. And true leadership is understanding that things might not always be your fault, but they are your responsibility. You know, you
Yeah.
you just got to be able to navigate that with a sense of, I'm going to take ownership of these results, even if they weren't necessarily my fault. It seems frustrating, but like you said, it's actually very empowering because then you start
Yeah.
to just feel more agency in the situation.
And I think you hit the other thing. It's context really matters, especially when you're looking at that SDR to AE move.
Right.
It's so easy to go on LinkedIn and, oh, look, these other 10 people who started 6 months after me have all gotten promoted. I've done just as much as they have. I've been in the role longer. I deserve it too. Mm-hmm. And something I work with a lot of people on is this idea that just constantly reminding promotions and when promotions happen are dictated by what the company needs, not by what you need. And once you let go of that, it gets a lot easier too. And I know you and I have even had this conversation about staying present and making sure you're getting the most out of this job that you can.
Yeah.
Versus just sitting here being like, when's my promotion getting here?
Right. I to that point, even I think the conversation we were having was, and this is also a framework I use for creating content. So I'll just kind of give the 2-for-1 here. But we all have experiences, and one that is common to many people is, what do you want to do when you graduate college? For me, as a political science major, that question, that experience was, what office do you want to run for, Blake, someday? And now the perspective at that time was, I'm not sure, because I still have so much to learn. The lesson that I learned throughout my time from that question to now was, it's not about the position I'm pursuing, it's about the person I'm becoming. So again, we've got these experiences, we got this perspective, and there's usually a lesson in there where you can, you know, create great content, and also to answer or speak to the topic at hand is taking that lesson from college and reapplying it in this current sales role, where I realized, yeah, I want to be an AE at that time, but I don't want it too soon. I don't want to miss out on the fundamentals of this craft, because if I go be an AE too soon and I don't have the skills I need, I'm going to let myself down, I'm going to fail, and have to come right back to where I am now. So I learned that lesson twice, just learn it once and be the right me. So that's kind of where that came from.
So I want to dive into this really quick, actually, because you've got something in your background that I don't think we've ever had anyone in the program have. Kasey and I are obviously rather political. We don't hide our biases. We try to put them out there so people can judge accordingly. But you've actually run for office.
Yeah.
So, okay. So give us the high level of what, so it was state Senate, I believe.
It was. So it's funny, my political background, I feel like Benjamin Button, you know, I was just like old and boring doing that work. And now I'm like young and vibrant again in sales. but it's really important, and it came from a deep place. So my junior year of high school, I went to this thing called Boys State. It was basically a week where you learn about civic engagement and responsibility, and it really struck a chord with me. So I came back my senior year of high school, and I had an American government class. This was in the middle of the '08 election, and we had this mock campaign. And I remember, thinking to myself, because at the time I was just kind of a knucklehead in high school, to put it very lightly. And I didn't take many things seriously in terms of school. But that class really struck a chord with me, and I started to ask myself, where can my skills mean the most for the most? And I had grown up giving speeches. I'd spoken before, and in this mock election, despite not being, I was known, but I wasn't the most popular kid in that class. But we won. Our group won that campaign, and it dawned on me, maybe politics is an area where I can take this skill set and serve people with it. So that being said, I went to college. I studied political science and communication. And then after that, I worked in our state capitol. And I was very, very close to the action, literally on the Senate floor, working with different senators, helping them communicate these bills back to their constituents.
And this was '08. You were there in the middle of Blagojevich.
So '08 was in high school. I did 4 years at University
Okay.
of Illinois, and then in 2012 went to the state capitol. So I missed the Blagojevich era, unfortunately. I say unfortunately, Illinois had a time there where like every other governor we had for like the last 8 governors went to prison for something. That's another conversation for another day.
It was a long time.
We're actually on a good streak right now. We've had like 3 governors not go to prison.
Yay.
But I saw what the work really was in politics. It's being able to listen and understand the needs of your constituents, and then take that to Springfield, to Washington, D.C., or wherever the capital is that you're doing that work, and building coalitions around that, building support around that, basically selling that idea. And I knew at 21 I could do that. I'd actually done it already. I was a school board member at my community college. And so with that as my motive, I worked on my master's in public administration, and then I came home and ran for state senate. State rep was there was a friend of mine who was already in that office. I was too young for Congress, and I didn't really want to do anything super local. So that's how state senate came about. But it was an experience. I learned a lot. I did as well as I think a 24-year-old can do. Raised a lot of money, had a lot of volunteers, but ultimately it just, there's a lot of powerful players in the political arena, and sometimes you just gotta wait your turn or play the game. And again, you learn a lot, but I say this, the toughest sell I ever made was knocking on people's doors on Saturday mornings, asking for their vote. So with that,
that's the
it was easy.
That's the toughest sales job. So I was a political science major. I worked in political campaigns. I worked on.
We have 3 poli-sci majors on this call, so we can get into it if we want to.
This is fantastic.
Well, no, I don't think we get into the politics side of it, but I think a lot about working on campaigns is really my introduction and where I fell in love with startups, because that's all a political campaign is. You have no institutional memory. 90% of the time, most of the people doing the actual work are unexperienced, but super passionate, are overworked and underpaid, all for something that they believe in, which is, that's startups. And plus, things move so quickly that you don't have time to get upset when something doesn't work out. You've just got to fix it and move on. And yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels to that. So, okay, so I'm curious then, you came out of that experience. What led you to decide to make a shift, and why sales?
So after that campaign ended, I worked on a congressional campaign for a year. That was during the 2016 election. And it was very difficult for a variety of reasons, but not the least of which our candidate lost. Unfortunately, I believed in him. He was a really good guy. But after that, I was just in a very liminal spot in my career. I had a good friend of mine. His name's Mike Harris, and he's a manager at Lyft. And he was saying to me at the time, Blake, you've done all these great things, but if I'm being honest with you, man, your resume doesn't quite make sense to me. It's kind of all over the place. And I felt that. And so I tried to start making sense of my resume. I did a year as an admissions counselor. And I'll never forget my manager at that time saying, this is a sales role, Blake. We're selling this university. And I thought to myself, I'm not getting paid like a salesperson. I'm also not getting trained like a salesperson. Like, if this is sales, then maybe I should consider actually working in sales. And so there I was, like, trying to figure out, how do I crack into sales? And then I started seeing all these startups, and I was like, I don't know what the hell a startup needs from me, because I don't know how to code. I didn't build a company in my parents' garage. But lo and behold, they need salespeople. And I found Victory Lab and basically realized I had been selling my whole life. I just was never in sales. And so they helped me kind of develop that mindset, give me the confidence and the competence I needed. And here I am now, a few years later, doing sales, loving it. In fact, convincing other people to come into this work. So it was a very interesting transition, but one I'm glad I made.
That's amazing. I think I'm a big believer in the whole, Daniel Pink, to sell is human kind of philosophy, but especially when it comes to politics and a lot of these other things. I think my first real job was door-to-door canvassing, and I was as I still am, in Portland, Oregon, and I was the preppiest looking one. So they sent me to all the Republican neighborhoods, and I can't tell you how many times I got doors slammed in my face. And you develop a really thick skin, and you learn that there's maybe less, tense conversations you can have.
I remember I was calling people in Chicagoland during the World Series, the one with the Cubs in it.
Where you actually won finally?
Yeah, I got cussed out a couple times. So when I was in sales and no one was cussing me out, I was like, this is great.
You're wait, people are actually the worst you're going to get is someone hanging up on you. That's not so bad. And when they don't, you make about 10 times more money than you did doing your shitty canvassing or your phone banking.
100% increase on the money I was making.
If not more. I'm laughing because I never did the door-to-door thing other than Girl Scout cookies and fundraising when I was in elementary school, when that was a thing that you did and you could go door-to-door.
Right. See, even different. You had something for them. That's the thing about politics. It's hey, my solution is maybe someday if I get elected, I'll do this for you. At least you have
just an idea.
You know what I'm saying? I didn't even have to.
Well, and it's one of the reasons, honestly, just the idea of that selling the idea, that's one of the reasons why I firmly believe, and based on my own experience as well, getting meetings is harder than closing deals. I firmly believe that, because you're getting people to give you time based off a promise, based off an idea. Whereas when you're actually in a selling process, you actually have a chance to earn the business with demonstrable deliverables, okay. But, actual proof in the pudding. And then it's a heck of a lot easier to ask for money, but it's a lot harder to get someone to give you time when they've never heard of your company, they don't know you from Adam, and and you're calling them out of the blue. You can get someone to say yes in that situation. That's crazy hard. It's not impossible, far from it. There are lots of little things you can do, but it comes back to that entitlement and that gratitude gap, I think, too, because it's that shifting that mindset from, they said no again. It's another no, to, hey, at least they listened this time. Hey, I got to check my pitch this time. I got to try out a new way to handle objections that didn't work. So now I know not to do that.
Right.
It's flipping that mindset around. And I think kind of even identifying that, we talked a lot about kind of the mental games that we play as a salesperson. And if that gap is inverted, I think there's probably a strong correlation between that and the high number of us that battle some form of mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. And I'm grateful that whether it be the pandemic or just the day and age we're in, that mental health is getting its day in the sun, particularly in sales, because that is turning off so many people to sales. Not just that it's difficult work, but how salespeople deal with that difficult work. It doesn't make this work very attractive to people, when in reality there is a way to deal with it, and it is very appealing work. We can get into that later, but like, yeah, it's unfortunate that that has been the stigma on this industry for too long.
Yeah,
So-
but to be good at it, you have to naturally be good at it, and I don't know, do a lot of cocaine or something.
One of the,
And that's not, I think that's the other thing that I see a lot, is that people that have never worked in sales or don't really understand it, they view it not as a discipline, but
people
as a
that
thing that you're either good at or you're not.
people that
But
work in
it's just, oh, totally, totally. And I
Well-
think that that does us as an industry a serious disservice. It doesn't let us, I don't know, approach it with a little bit of nerdiness and some curiosity in the same way. And I think that's also one of the reasons why it leads to these like really personal feelings of failure when you do struggle, because it's viewed as not like, oh, I didn't learn this, or I haven't been taught this skill, or it's that like scarcity mindset of, instead of that growth mindset of, oh no, I just haven't learned this yet, or I haven't gotten good at this yet, or I just need a little bit more help here. So I'm curious, in your experience, and especially working with young people, convincing them that sales is a good career for them, how do you talk about some of these things? How do you think about that shift in mindset?
It's actually a tactic I learned giving speeches growing up, and it's to put your focus on the audience. So, a lot of times people are really afraid to give speeches because they're worried they're going to mess up, they're worried they're going to get laughed at, they're worried they're going to forget things. And all of that thinking is selfish thinking. It's very self-centered in that way. And, I was taught, think about the audience, what they're getting out of it, how they might benefit from this. And that put me at ease. Same thing is true in sales. Sales is not about hitting your number, closing your deal, building yourself. It is about solving problems for other people. And so if you can get on the same side of the table with them and look at their problem and help them come up with a solution, or provide them a solution, that changes that mindset. And you don't embody your failures, because it's not about you anymore. It's about them. Do they need this? Do they need it now? And if the answer to those questions is no, that's not about you. It's not about your inability to be a sales professional inherently. It's just about, maybe you don't have the skills and you need to get better. Or perhaps it's just not the right time for them, or they need to have that conversation 3 more times. And so just helping them see what sales is and is not, I think helps give that sense of distance from the results in a way.
I think you're spot on. And that's something I think a lot of people struggle with when they're coming into sales, is this, they hear all the time, it's so hard, there's so much rejection, and why would anyone do this to themselves? And that usually results in me making a crack about us all being masochists, which we're not. It is just that. You just learn to develop that sense of distance. Your reaction when I call you, and you, one of the rare ones who cursed me out, that has nothing to do with me. That's just a matter of your dog just died. You're watching the Cubs in the World Series.
And they were losing that day, by the way. So.
That was
let's point this out. Let's be very clear here.
No, and like in that point, that because hey, that's a great learning experience. Maybe I shouldn't be calling people when we're losing. Maybe I should be focusing my call times on these optimal periods.
I tried. Tuesday night at 8 p.m. was not the right way to go, but hey, we were a week from the election, so what do I know?
Yeah, you make things work, and it's that sort of thing. I'm curious too, because especially you work with younger people, and I know this is a huge core tenet of Victory Lap, both from your internal staffing as well as the recruits that you guys work with. I've looked at the program, can't say enough good things about it. But one of the things you guys hold very closely is diversity, and that's something we know there's a recruiting problem in tech, in that the standard practice for the past 20 years has been, let's go clone our top performer. And that top performer is typically, in 95% of cases, a white guy who played some sort of D1 sport. And so now we're realizing, oh, that leads to an echo chamber and not a really well-performing team and all of these other issues that we're trying to deal with. But we hear again and again from, I mean, I've heard it dozens of times. I know Kasey's heard it a ton. And I'm sure you hear it at Victory Lab. People say, oh, well, I'd love to hire more diverse people, but I can't find them. They're not applying. How do you make sales? So two things there. One, how do you deal with the managers who say they can't find them? And two, when you're talking to people from these disenfranchised groups, how do you sell sales to them differently than you would kind of that stereotypical D1 white athlete? Because if we're selling it the same way, we know we're doing something wrong because we're sales pros and we know we got to personalize.
Yeah. The first thing, so to the manager that can't find the diverse candidates, I mean, as a sales professional, we're taught to ask questions. So my first question would be, well, what are you doing to find them? Because, I mean, if you've got this robust strategy to find diverse candidates and it's still not working, then yeah, we got something to talk about. But if you're not even looking, well, then sure, there's a reason why you're not finding it. The second question is a little bit trickier. So, I mean, to diverse candidates, I guess I just try and help them see that selling is fundamentally human. And I think a lot of times people in sales that are in the work try and make it out to be this like special, you just have it innately and it's for certain types of people, and that's not the case. And so for someone who doesn't quite have the same level of representation in the sales world, in the business world, it can be hard to see themselves succeeding in it until someone explains to them, hey, can you ask good questions? Can you listen empathetically? You can be a good sales rep. And I think it's just giving them that sense of hope and confidence that they have what it takes to learn this work and to succeed in it. And I just think it's simply people haven't been approaching them with it, you know? So it's not so much like it's a different way of selling to them as much as it is that I am selling to them. 30% of our cohorts are people of color. 54% of them come from some form of diverse background at Victory Lab, and that's not by accident. You know, we know that this work should not be a backup. Sales should not be a backup career. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. There's 4% of universities have a dedicated sales program, and 46% of graduates will go on to do sales work at some point in their career. So it's really just a matter of presenting it to people in a way that they might not have heard before.
I think that's spot on. And it's really interesting. I've had this conversation, I think, more with women where, and this is kind of my story too, of like, I just know a lot of women that kind of fell into sales where it's like, you know, they were applying for a different job. We've had a couple people on the podcast actually where they were applying for a marketing job and the sales VP was like, hey, I actually think you'd be good at sales. Would you consider this? Or like, honestly, I mean, I'm much older than you. And so back when I got my first sales job, even the canvassing job, that was because I was, you know, into politics, but even my first real sales job, they didn't say it was sales. They talked about it in this way where it was like, oh, talking to people, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and I'd gone to this like super intellectual college where I graduated having like literally no clue what a person could do for a living other than go into politics. And I was burnt out on that. And so I just sort of like fell into it. And then I was like, oh, wait, like I actually kind of like this and there's something here. And I think that's very common. And so I like what you're talking about though, of just of being able to sort of approach someone that is the non-traditional salesperson and just cluing them into the fact that this is a thing, that it is approachable, that it is an ideal kind of career path. I'm curious too, though. So Ashleigh and I have also talked on this podcast quite a bit about, and I'm biased because I didn't stay in sales, about how sales is also just an amazing place to start a career, because you learn about all these other departments and all these other disciplines. You get all this exposure, you get good at communication, all that stuff. Is that something you talk about with, you know, the people at Victory Lab? And I don't know what you call your, I'm saying the people, the candidates. What do you,
Yeah, students.
Students, okay. And how often are you seeing, former students kind of make that path of like starting and then branching out from there?
Yes, to answer shortly. And I love that it is such a launching point for people's
Yeah.
careers. I didn't know what account management or customer success was before sales.
No.
But now it's like that's fantastic work. It's really interesting. Um, and then yes, we do see a number of our graduates then pivot into other departments, other aspects, even other careers, because again, that sales skill set is one that serves you in a variety of different industries.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you have sales experience and you're a coder, you can start to think about, okay, how might the customer interact with this? What pain points are they solving? And then to go talk to the salespeople or the marketing department and ask those thoughtful questions. Not to say that coders don't do that inherently, but like that is a sales skill set. If they're
Yeah.
already doing that, maybe they should consider selling some things too on the side. But it's just it's a fascinating set of skills that can take you really far, whether you stay an individual contributor for 25, 30 years, or you branch into another area of life. That's one of the reasons why I was so adamant about getting that craft to develop. Was when I left politics, I realized I wanted to go back to it with a skill set from the private sector. I didn't want to just be another politician who all I know is fundraising and passing legislation. That's important, but I'd love to bring something else, a unique perspective to that arena. So now with sales, that's a thing. It's understanding people. It's really getting a feel for what their pain points are, their ambitions, and then creating solutions to fill those needs or desires.
And then going about the process of selling those solutions to, like, that's one thing. I use that same example with coders, but I also take it to the extent of how often have you pitched something to your boss and they say no? Would you like another shot at getting them to say yes? That's sales. How often are you dealing with family dynamics where you really want someone to behave a certain way or to do a certain task for you? You can apply sales tactics to that. Although if you're in sales for long enough, your partners will typically start to pick up on this stuff. We were at a happy hour the other day and someone shared, someone got called out for mirroring in a relationship fight, and that cracked me up.
That is hilarious, yeah.
So there's really nothing that you can't apply in any role. I mean, learning how to write business emails, learning how to have professional conversations, learning how to, honestly, one of the skills I think no one talks about, but that is so essential for success in entry-level sales is organization and prioritization. If you don't have those two things, you are going to really struggle. And that's not something anyone teaches really ever. And so it's very much trial by fire, unless you've got a good boss who makes it a point to instill those things in you. But those are core life skills, not sales skills. And it's so easy to overlook a lot of that stuff. And I think it's interesting too, to kind of pull things back a little bit, how those skills, sales skills and life skills, can be manipulated to whatever it is you want to do. Like you mentioned, possibly going back into politics someday. First of all, let me know. I will captain up your phone banks. I'm here for that. But it's interesting how people are, there's a movement finally, I think, in hiring where people are starting to stop expecting people to come in and say, I want to be an AE. They're starting to allow people to come in and say, I'm not sure where I'm going to go, or I want to go into CS, or I want to go into marketing, and take these different paths because they understand they are starting to appreciate these different skills that people can bring to the table.
Right.
But I'm kind of curious about this idea of how this can fit into both, we work at Victory Lab and with yourself, how this fits into like that overall identity and purpose that we're all trying to look for to drive us.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned it, because for all the things that you mentioned professionally, sales has the similar benefits in our personal life. One might think, oh God, if I were to use sales in my relationship, that would just be the end of it. When in actuality, no, that's not the case. Asking your partner thoughtful questions and then shutting up and listening to their answers can take your relationship a very long way. Yeah. Right? And being able to identify, what are those frustrations? Okay, how do I stop making them happen? again, sales tactic. But as it relates back to the career pathing, you're right. We are selling ourselves, even if you're not in sales. When you try and get a promotion, when you ask your boss to, back a project, that's sales. And a key part of sales is first identity, whether that's understanding your product, your solution, or just understanding yourself. And there's a lot of people, unfortunately, they don't understand themselves. They don't really even like themselves. And they have a hard time having that self-compassion, which then leads to an inability to be self-aware, which then leads to you're just kind of drifting through life. And yeah, I guess I'll be an AE because that's the next thing. And which leads to the second part of that, which is the purpose piece. Like, what do you want? What sort of outcome are you looking for? An even better question, what sort of impact do you want to make on another person? No one really is successful in this world without impacting other people. I think there's maybe Dale Carnegie quote. He's like, you can get whatever you want in life so long as you help other people get what they want.
Yeah.
Like you have to serve other people in this way. And so by connecting those two, who you are and what you want, you can then start to talk about practice, what it is that I have to do to get there. But it's just unfortunate because a lot of people don't take the time to answer those very simple questions.
Well, and I think this goes back to what you were saying before about applying this idea that we have in college of what do you want to do when you grow up, or who do you want to be, right? We can reverse engineer our own kind of path and our own future. We have to understand sort of where we want to go. And I think one of the things that is sort of that aha moment that I think a lot of us have had at some point is when we recognize, like, we can imagine the kind of person we want to be, the kind of impact that we want to have, and start to think, okay, what is that person? What do they do on a daily basis? What books do they read? What daily habits do they have? What kind of content do they create? What kind of job do they have? What kind of skills do they learn? And we can create that pathway of sort of reverse engineering it. And I don't know why we don't talk about it as much in this, like, it can be this like very practical sort of step-by-step kind of thing. So I'm curious, as you think about it for you, and you're obviously a very thoughtful person when it comes to kind of yourself and your path, but you're obviously helping other people in this way and have in a bunch of different capacities. How do you talk about that with others, of like helping them create that pathway, or even just creating the vision that is going to help them find that path?
So at risk of sounding like the sales life coach right now, one of the things that I try and do is help them understand what feelings they're after. Yeah. So a lot of times, a simple way to get someone to understand what they want is to ask, like, what did you need when you were growing up?
Yeah.
Or what did you need when you were younger? That's, sometimes we're people in, but it's also just a great starting point. For some, it's support. For others, it's belief, encouragement. There's a lot of different things that we needed growing up. And then from there, you start to think, okay, how can I provide that for other people? And other questions like, how did they change as a result of that? What is the now impact in their lives? And so by thinking about those deeper questions, like asking yourself why 2 and 3 times, is really where you start to get the clarity of those sorts of desires and ambitions. So it's not just, who am I? I'm a leader, right? Okay, why? Well, because I like to see people, succeed. I like to see people fulfilled. Cool, why? Oh, right? And you start to just kind of go layers deeper, and you realize, maybe as just an example, like, I feel most alive when other people, bring me along on their journey. Right. And so then you now look for the opportunities to bring other people along on their journey. So it's about finding what feeling you're after. And if you're not in tune with those feelings, if you've never really been one to like think about them, it can be a very overwhelming experience, but a very necessary one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that you use the word feeling, because, and I am becoming a broken record on this. Like, I say it all the time. I think a lot about the Maya Angelou quote where she says, no one's going to remember what you did or what you said, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. So if you can think about like, how do I want to make people feel? If people remember nothing else.
Right.
And there's something about when you have that in mind always, it adds this, I think, really helpful sort of filter on things. Add some clarity to kind of the direction you're going in.
That's right. Yeah, it becomes a filter for a lot of different decisions because now you know what you're after. You also know what you're not. And you
Yeah.
can make a lot of decisions that way.
Yeah.
For the record, I think your new LinkedIn byline should be the sales life coach, because I think there's a lot of us who could use that.
Life coach. That's super cheesy, and my friends would make fun of me. But at this point, why not?
Lean into the cheese. Who cares? Cheese is delicious. Can't you tell I'm hungry? All right. So this has been absolutely delightful. Blake, you are just every time I hear you speak, and you were you were just calling it out too, if you haven't seen it yet, you were on our Selling Well Black panel back in late July, which was absolutely fantastic. I think we got like 5 or 6 Blake-isms out of that. And I think we got a few more from those today. But we got one more opportunity to get a few more Blake-isms out of you, and that is the lightning round.
Here we go.
Here we go. So these are a series of rapid fire questions. Don't think too much about them. They're designed to just be a little bit lighthearted and fun. So we'll start with, I think probably the most revealing question that we asked today. What is your morning routine?
Well, there's the one that I do and there's the one that I want to do. I mean, at its simplest form, I like to wake up my body, like a shower or something, wake up my mind, so meditate, journal, and then, wake up my soul, just kind of like vision board or just writing down goals. Like that's the ideal one, right? There's something for all 3 of those.
I love that. So pick one person who's had a significant impact on your career.
Well, I mean, I already mentioned once, my friend Mike Harris. One of the things I love about Mike is he's always giving me these great basketball metaphors. And so recently here we were talking about how like comparing our careers to that of professional basketball players helped us realize we're very young. Like here I am thinking, 10 years in, this grizzled veteran. No, dude, you're basically like a junior in college if you were an NBA player. And so it's like you have that context, that perspective, and Mike just does a really good job of laying that out.
All right, I love that. What is your pump up song?
Pump up song. Wow. It's kind of weird, but like I like a lot of R&B. So anything by Division, it just like, I don't know, gets me in a good mood. It's like chill, but at the same time gets me going.
I love it. It's like, what's your favorite Division song right now?
Well, the one that I feel like gets stuck in my head all the time is In Between. It's got this really cool guitar riff at the beginning, which like just kind of, how earworms work. Like you start singing it and you can't finish it. So you just keep singing it.
I love that. What's one thing you wish you'd learned earlier in your life?
Yeah, I feel like I'm still kind of learning it, but like you don't have to wear a mask for anyone. In fact,
right now during COVID, yes, you do. But
I was just gonna say, like, we got to reference COVID here.
That's right. No.
Other than the face mask, you don't have to wear a mask, but please wear the face mask.
Definitely wear a mask. Wash your hands too. No, you don't have to wear
animals.
Like, this like theoretical mask, right?
Yeah.
We'll try and pretend. For an interview, for example. A lot of people go into an interview, they try and be someone they're not. It's like, great, if you get hired, now you got to be a sales rep and an actor. You got to be the person you were.
And not only that, like, especially in the age of social media, people are way better at seeing through that shit. So it doesn't get you as far as it maybe would have 7 years ago.
Didn't work 7 years ago.
Gas meter is like spot on.
And what's crazy is we think the cool kids are the ones that have it all together. The cool kids are the ones that think they're cool. Right. And then the people that gravitate to them are about that. The people that don't like them, great. I know why they don't like me. So just be yourself, basically, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and be really comfortable with that.
I think it's important to call out too in sales, the people who have it all together don't.
Right.
If they're saying they have it all together, they're lying.
Right. It's really about who can articulate how they don't have it together and how they're trying, or maybe asking others for help. That's what gets me going.
100%. All right. What's your favorite sales book or business book?
I have a bunch back here. You know what? It's interesting. It's this book called Ditch the Pitch, The Art of Improvised Persuasion. And I really love improv. I try and treat my sales calls like improv. I go with the flow. I try and treat life like improv, you know? Everything doesn't have to be so scripted. So Ditch the Pitch. It's a short little book by Stevie Astro. But it's great. It'll help you have more authentic conversations in your sales calls.
That's good. What's one way somebody could have been a better ally to you?
In any particular context or just in general?
Whatever comes to mind.
You know, honestly, just validating my experience. You know, it's a lot of times where you share something with someone and then they'll try and like dispute it, or they'll try and like play devil's advocate with it because they haven't experienced it the exact same way. When sometimes you just need to just say, man, I really get that. Like, I see where you're coming from. Just maybe ask a second or third follow-up question and just listen and validate that person's experience and perspective. Because then, if nothing else, that person can at least feel heard. You know, they feel seen in that way, and they don't feel like they have to convince someone of their experience.
They're no longer alone.
Right, that too.
It's so true. All right, so what's one way that you're working to be a better ally for others?
You know, I will say I feel like I'm speaking up more. Like the topics, for example, that we're dealing with now, like racial and systemic injustice, these sorts of things, I kind of waited for the right opportunities to talk about them. And really there is no quote unquote right opportunity. The right opportunity is the opportunity that you have every day. And so just when I see things, trying to speak up on the behalf of a person, or just trying to educate where I can, and not worrying about like how it's going to be perceived. If a person's offended by me trying to help them, great. Like I tried to do something positive. You didn't like it. That's fine. I can live with that. What I can no longer live with is just sitting by idly while other people continue to hurt themselves and other people. So.
Okay, last but not least, what is your guilty pleasure at the end of a long day?
So of late, there's two, right? There's the food guilty pleasure, which is like, I am just all about Snickers bars. Like it's like a problem. And actually just went to the dentist the other day and they confirmed it's a problem. But so Snickers bars is one. And I've really been big on this app lately called Moneyline, which is basically just like you have these different sports prop bets. Like, hey, will LeBron score 27 points over or under? And now I'm like watching these games. Like I even got my fiance into it and she's like, pass the ball to CJ. Like, what are you doing? Like all invested. She's great by it. She's like 12 for 13. She's I
was going to say that the women I know who are into betting are scary good.
It's ridiculous. I really need to just start asking her and then doing what she said, but it's the other way around.
You mentioned you're engaged. That's a marriage tip.
Yeah, for life, not just for betting, just for life. Otherwise, you're betting your life away. If you don't do that. So yeah, those are my two.
That's good. All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much for this conversation.
You're welcome. Feel free to send me some Snickers bars, anyone out there that hears this. That's one of my love languages, for sure.
So, and now we know what your thank you gift is going to be. All right, so Blake, how can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Blake Hudson. You can email me, blake@victorylab.io. Definitely check out one of our boot camps. We have a boot camp that's an 8-week program for folks that want to have an entry into sales. We also have Sprint Series, which is kind of a quicker but more specific focus on different subjects like prospecting, closing, and also one for managers. So check us out.
I'll say this, I don't do this often. I have looked at their curriculum. It's good. This is really good stuff. All right. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Blake, thank you again so much for joining us. This has been an absolute blast. Thank you, listeners, for listening all the way through. As usual, please don't forget to like, subscribe. If you're really feeling Get Generous today, show some gratitude. We'd appreciate it by posting a review on especially Spotify and Apple Podcasts would be fantastic. Make sure that you are subscribed to get all notifications on future episodes. The state of sales results are going to be coming soon, and you are not going to want to miss that stuff. And with that, thank you for listening to another episode of The Other Side of Sales, and we will see you next time.